on that list by putting a cloud over them, by indicting them if they can, putting them through financial, emotional, difficult times and ruin if possible. And I'm going to go on a limb and say this. I think that that these indictments will be dismissed.
Come on,
I think
asshole.
that Donald Trump knows they'll be
Asshole.
dismissed, and he is okay with proceeding to then say that the system was rigged against him, that some judge and that will just perpetuate him further and further down that list.
We're going to stay on top of this story. That grand jury in Virginia could reach a decision, as Andrew and Carol have said, in a moment, and we will know about it. As Andrew points out, it's public. When we come back, there's brand new reporting on another part of this story. The Wall Street Journal has new reporting that shows how Donald Trump directed the work of the Justice Department by two social posts explicitly, plus new friction today. Donald Trump's deportation for prominent.
This, do you think, is most potentially problematic or concerning going forward? One critical one, maybe, for example, the demand or insistence that Hamas disarm. It doesn't seem clear yet that that's actually been performed.
Yeah, I think, look, we've had other ceasefire deals in the past. The exchange of hostages, and then it kind of fizzles out, right? And you really hope that that doesn't happen this time around. But it's always been on that sticking point of kind of moving around with weapons in Gaza, IDF, where are they located in Gaza, and then Hamas, what are they able to do in Gaza? Hamas is saying that they signed up for the deal, which in my reading means disarmament. But, we have the proof is in the pudding here. There's clearly things that have to be worked out, and the Israelis are signaling that they have to work on some details. So I like the idea that Trump and Kushner are in the parliament meeting, they're pressuring, they're clearly using force of the U.S. government, pressure the U.S. government to get this over the finish line, which again, I think is an important and a laudable thing.
Senator, I'm going to stand by for me for just 1 second, and I would like to come back to the Senator and get her to react to this immediately, but we do need to get to this breaking news out of the White House with Kristen Holmes. Kristen, I understand we have some legal breaking news.
Yeah, we have just learned that New York Attorney General Letitia James, who obviously brought the charges and won, Donald Trump, has just been indicted by the Department of Justice. This was a case that President Trump wanted to be brought. It's a mortgage fraud case. And it's also what led to the leaving of the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. Eric Siebert would not bring these charges. We heard that he had reservations about bringing these charges. And instead, he left that position, and President Trump handpicked Lindsay Halligan to serve as the U.S. Attorney in that district. We saw Lindsay Halligan bring a case against James Comey, the former FBI director, to a grand jury that he also indicted. Now,
Bobby, get a therapist who gets you.
Against Letitia James, we don't have all the details of how many counts or which she might have been indicted on, but we have learned did vote indict Letitia James as well. Again, this is another person that has spoken about both publicly bringing the case her position. The grand jury did indict earlier today.
All right, this was on the heels of the indictment and eventual arraignment of Jim Comey. Kristen, do stay. We're going to keep digging into this with our but from Michigan and Senator. I realize that you're learning the news of this right along with the part of a bigger story. And I
to go after political adversaries.
whether it's or now James, Lisa Cook on the Fed, Adam Schiff here in the Senate. And if that doesn't send a shiver down the spine of anybody, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, another administration can be suddenly the arms of the government are being wielded against the Republican Party. It's a broken way to do politics. I think
Started,
Which is late for you.
so it's late for me, and I was told that I wasn't even in the building, and I was like, wow.
The way he rolls. But yeah,
all that stuff. To get indicted. That's pretty good. Try a case. Easy for the jury.
have been in and direction.
I think that I want to address my and say protect that you see that in the Democrats even going after Republicans, and this is Republicans going after Democrats. Since we're in the Letitia James case that she brought in New York, there was a trial. Back to where James, we all could look at those facts, and Donald Trump had a chance and opportunity to hear all of that. Here, the process by which this has been undertaken, like the process that was undertaken with respect to James Comey, tells you the career of people and even appointed people did not think that there was evidence. There were not facts that justify this. And I think a perfect symbol of the fact that this is different, that what we're seeing is different. It is not normal. It is not everyone does it, is to take a look at Abbe Lowell. Abbe Lowell is the defense lawyer for Letitia James. He was also the defense lawyer for Hunter Biden. In the Biden administration, the Department of Justice actually charged and convicted the sitting president's son. And Abbe Lowell represented him and defended him and lost that trial.
Yeah.
And he is now defending Letitia James. And when people say it's tit for tat, it's like, no, in prior administrations, and by the way, Republican and Democratic administrations under normal times, which I agree with Mark, are gone. Under normal times in those administrations, there is no politics that is supposed to be considered. I'm not saying it's never considered, and there are those aberrations.
No,
That's not how you're built.
Right. Andrew, let me bring Carol Leonnig back in. Carol Leonnig broke the news today exclusively that a grand jury was hearing evidence against Tish James. We have now heard the news that New York Attorney General Letitia James has been indicted. Carol Leonnig.
Yeah, a few minutes ago we confirmed that she was indicted by a grand jury in Alexandria on at least one count of bank fraud. Nicole, and the return was rather speedy. 4 o'clock was when the grand jury
present their information to Halligan. There was a four-person in the room along with Halligan, and they released their decision. I will tell you, there's one other really interesting element to this that I'm hearing from sources, which is that this grand jury made its decision and listened to the presentation on its very first day in the box. In other words, grand juries sit sometimes for weeks and weeks. This grand jury was impaneled today, and this was their first case and their first decision.
Carol, any reaction from any of the resigned or fired U.S. attorneys in the Virginia offices that had looked at these cases and been pressured before Lindsay Halligan's appointment to bring them and refused?
Well, in the 10 minutes since I was last with you, and the 10 minutes before we were recording, I have not spoken with some of those folks, but I can tell you from previous conversations that they were bracing for this. Letitia James herself, I understand from sources, was fully expecting that she would be indicted. Again, keeping in mind that the standard for indicting someone is the probability that their mate was committed. And it's a very, very low standard, but she was expecting this and bracing for it herself. Prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia, some of them driven out by their decision not to this case. Some of them are being discussed about other cases that Donald Trump is pressing and insists on. He wants to get to all of his enemies list. Those people have been really tortured on all of this because for them, evidence that has to be presented at the trial to sustain a conviction. Like evidence, the bulk of terrorism. And relentless prosecutions in the home, moving quickly and speedily, but also focusing on the toughest cases, the ones that protect the jury, both from international terrorism, from domestic terrorism. It became this place often described as the rocket docket because there was no flinching, no waiting. Prosecutors had a joke of, look, I go to the defense and I say, we're going to indict you on you don't come in and plead and indict on Monday. It had a very unflinching quality about it. But it is part of the behemoth of the Department of Justice. And I think it's so important that you focus on this, Nicole, the legacy. The Department of Justice's manual for prosecutors, its advice to them is do not bring a case out of pettiness. Do not bring a case out of political or partisan goals. Do not bring a case because you feel some animus to this individual. Bring a case after you rigorously assess the facts, are sure that they are solid and true, and believe that this is in the public interest to bring this case. There's a joke now going around in Washington, D.C. that if Letitia James can be charged with bank fraud, pretty much anybody could, because we fill out financial forms all the time where someone checks the wrong box. We don't know all the facts in Letitia James's case, but the ones we have in front of us, certainly, and the ones prosecutors in this office assessed multiple times, did not seem like a very strong case.
Well, and now to your point, we don't have all the facts, but Trump's own appointees inside the Department of Justice did. And until Lindsay Halligan got there, Trump's own political appointees to these offices didn't believe there was a case against Letitia James.
That's right. And my understanding is that Attorney General Bondi and City Attorney General Blanche, while certainly very fierce supporters of the president, privately had concerns about this case, privately understood where Eric Siebert was coming from and wanted to try to keep that U.S. attorney in place and understood his reservations.
Director Brennan, let me bring you in on this, and let me try to sort of honor Mark Elias's note about anchoring the news in the moment in which we are, not the moment we remember being. You're on this list. Is your life different knowing that without any facts, with Trump being there an entire first term, raging against you and carrying out the revenge he could? I think he took your security clearances away by 2017 or 18. That this isn't a moment where our country is led by a party in the White House, at the Department of Justice, or in Congress, or in the media, which is, I think, where Andrew's note about tit for tat being out there. And I appreciate the big disinformation in the bud as much as anyone. But there isn't a two sides frame that you can put this story in. MAGA Republicans refused to indict Jim Comey. MAGA Republicans refused to indict Tish James. Today, Jim Comey has been arraigned, and 40 minutes ago, Tish James was indicted. Where are we?
Uncle, I think this is just one feature that we have seen in the last 9 months in terms of the collapse of the America that we knew. When I look at the footage of ICE raids throughout the country, the deployment of U.S. military, the actions against law firms, universities, other types of organizations that he doesn't like, and then going after his critics. I agree with him more when he said that Donald Trump really doesn't care. He would like people to get convicted, but he knows he can't control that. What he would like, though, is to have the word indicted right to individuals' names. And he knows that he has a Department of Justice that he can exploit and manipulate, and he has an Attorney General who's willing to do the bidding. I'm old enough to remember the days of Watergate, when we had an Attorney General, Elliot Richardson, and a Deputy Bill Buckles, who be so rather than do what President Nixon wanted to do. We are not anymore. We don't have individuals who clearly is a democratic authoritarian effort on the part of the Trump administration, not just Trump. Mr. Stephen Miller and others, mean-spirited, very, vengeful, in many respects, trying to hurt and damage people across the board, whether or not you're an undocumented individual who's been here for 30 years, has, raised a family and has a job, or you're a former national security professional who's worked over 3 decades to try to keep this country safe. If you're not on the Trump team, then you are potentially a target. And I think, as Carol mentioned, the way that they're going out now and trolling and looking for ways to be able to indict people or bring charges against people, really, it's something that should worry every American. And the fact that the Republicans in Congress are allowing this to happen, that I find is the most appalling part. Until they grow some, in Congress and really say enough is enough, I think we're going to continue to see these abuses of power, which is what it is.
When I said, where are we, I didn't expect we'd be where Director Brennan says gross on, but that is exactly where we are. And I think that there is quiet reluctance to question why the people still in positions to sound the alarms aren't sounding them loudly.
Yeah, it's one of the great tragedies of this time is how few people are willing to step forward and say, critically that what is happening is wrong and what is happening right now is authoritarianism. I want to give a little bit of color to the Eastern District of Virginia because I have a slightly less rose-colored glasses version of it as someone who has been a lawyer on the defense side and never been a prosecutor. The Eastern District of Virginia became the Eastern District of Virginia in part because it was the Rocket Docket, which was a benefit to prosecutors.
Explain what that means. Rocket Docket means things move more quickly.
Very quickly. The judges insist that cases move very quickly, which, frankly, if you representing a criminal defendant is not usually to your benefit. So it was used as a jurisdiction point of the judges. It was also viewed as a pro-prosecution jurisdiction from the standpoint of jurors and grand jurors, right? Like this is a jury pool, like a grand jury pool, that unlike the District of Columbia, right across the river, where those cases candidly could have also been indicted, those terrorism cases, the sense was that the judges were more sympathetic to defendants and the jurors might be more sympathetic. So I think it's no surprise that we are seeing the Department of Justice or District of Virginia to indict cases where they possibly can, because it is viewed as a pro-prosecution office, a pro-prosecution bench, and a pro-prosecution jury pool. And I expect that as we move forward with Donald Trump's revenge tour or vengeance tour or authoritarian tour, we're going to see the selection of jurisdictions where he thinks that is the Department of Justice. You mentioned John Doe court. It was dismissed very, very quickly. So what was the issue with Virginia? Now that also led to an acquittal, but I think it is no surprise that we are seeing these cases in that particular courthouse.
John Hellman, the reality here is that this is very unpopular. I mean, Steve Bannon is probably he is his joy, very, very happy. I'm sure it's not help Donald Trump, profound political weakness. The shutdown is understanding the American people, largely healthcare, and they believe that Democrats will stand for healthcare. Trump would tell you that illegally not being left to stay is far more popular than percent approval rating. So this is another big depressive action making the news. What do you make of the fact that they are on a path where just about everything they're doing is politically unpopular?
Well, I make of it that to start with, that a number of those things you talked about before are both unpopular and hugely salient to voters. I would say in particular, the healthcare issues that are driving up costs, the same as inflation's already going up. Look at the Trump campaign on bringing up prices, he's failed. The tariffs have driven up prices, and now they want to take away the Obamacare subsidies. They're going to drive up insurance rates. I mean, that is a recipe for a wave in 2026 that you could walk faster. What is it? It's great up the way. They're going to police on that about 30% approval rating. Let's tell Democrats run the table, including a bunch of our right red states. Let's just prices up on the most essential things. Let's not fix the stuff that really matters to people like health. They are running solution. Elections. Elections, which is many questions not militarizing the American states. You change the electorate, you read Republican seats. You put military on the street, you put states to scare people into the polling base. There's all kinds of stuff you could do to either alter the election or cancel it altogether. That's it. If you start to think through what could possibly explain all these things, the only logical answer is the election. Donald Trump believes one way or the other is not going to be
son of a bitch.
I think that's what you have to think about here. I'm glad to hear Director Brennan said the thing that I really thought was important, which is that he talked about how it's appalling that Republicans are not saying that Donald Trump, as opposed to saying it's surprising. This is something we were talking about a second ago. And to Mark Lyon, parallel point to what Mark made about how